Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Story Time, the series where I tell you weird, crazy, funny stories about things that have happened in my life, and hopefully you guys get some enjoyment out of them. Now, today's story that I want to tell you is called The Drunk Paramedic, and I'm not going to point any fingers as to who this is, but what I will tell you is before I became a full-time YouTuber, I went to school to become a firefighter, paramedic, one of the two, and I went to a bunch of schooling for this, and I have passed my provincial exams. I'm fully licensed to be a paramedic in Ontario, but YouTube makes a lot of money, so here we are. So, this story is actually going to take place at a friend's bachelor party. It includes booze, blood, no broken bones, but other than that, it's a pretty good story. So, we go away for the weekend for a friend's bachelor party, and I'm not going to say all the names there, but there was me, my friend Dan, and 13 other people. So we're staying in a chalet in a mountain. So we go get all our beds and everything set up, and then we go out to a bunch of different breweries, have a bunch of beers throughout the day, get back to the chalet, have a bunch more drinks, and this story takes place at 2 to 3 a.m., really early in the morning. We had been drinking all day. I'm a bunch of beers deep, and at this time, my buddy Dan is down in the hot tub, and I am up on the balcony. So, Dan had been drinking in the hot tub for probably like an hour or so, decides he needs another beer, so swings his leg over the top of the hot tub, knocks his empty beer bottle off the hot tub, and steps right down on it. Now, I didn't hear any of this. I was on the other side of the building. I didn't hear the glass break. I didn't hear Dan say anything. None of it. But luckily at that about same time, someone was coming out the screen door to go outside, sees Dan and goes, "Dan, that's a lot of blood coming out of your foot." And Dan goes, "I'm fine." Now, everyone there knew that I went to school to be a paramedic. They know what I do now, all of that kind of stuff. But someone starts calling my name. Corey, come down here." And what I assumed is that they were about to start a drinking game. It's time to play beer pong. It's time to play flip cup. We're just getting the night fired up. It's 2 a.m. So I slowly make my way down through this giant building, down the stairs, out the back, towards the hot tub. I open the sliding glass door window and go, "Dan, that's a lot of blood." And Dan goes, "I'm fine." And I go, "All right, let's have a look at this." So I lift up his foot, and blood is literally pouring out of his foot. Like, the only way I can explain it is if you took a pitcher, filled it with blood, and just turned it upside down. That's Dan's foot. So I go, "All right, has anyone called 911? They go, "No, why would we do that?" And Dan goes, "We don't need to call 911. And I go, "Dan, buddy, I wouldn't lie to you. We need to call 911. So somebody goes and calls 911. And at this point, I go, "Okay, I got to get this bleeding to stop. Like, this is a lot of blood." And to this day, I've worked as a paramedic. I've seen people get stabbed. I've seen people cut their heads open. I have seen people rip the skin off the side of their arm. Dan's foot, is the most amount of blood I have ever seen. It was insane how much blood was coming out the bottom of his foot. So I have a look at it, and I pretty quickly realized that he hit a vein. Now, there's like two types of bleeding. If it was an artery, it would kind of spurt. That's the only way I can explain it. You've probably seen that in cartoons before. It literally happens in real life. If you hit a vein, it kind of just like pours out, and the color of the blood is a little bit different as well. So I figured Dan hit a vein. So I go, "All right, someone get me a first aid kit or paper towels. We got to get this bleeding to stop." And keep in mind, I had been drinking the entire day. I'm probably like a lot of beers deep at this point. And when I saw the blood, it was really weird because I very quickly went from drunk Corey to paramedic Corey. Like, there was no in between. And even after this all wrapped up, everyone there went like, "How did you sober up that quick? Like, you didn't chug a cup of coffee." I'm like, "I don't know. It just, something happened, and all of a sudden I was a different Corey." So they go and get the paper towel. We don't have a first aid kit because we're at a bachelor party. And my buddy just goes, "Here's the paper towel," balls a bunch of it up. I throw it on Dan's foot. I also have his foot elevated. If you've ever heard of or done any first aid and heard of RICE, the acronym, basically for a wound, an open wound, you want compression, cold, and elevation are really the three big ones. So I lift his leg up, put pressure on the bottom of it with a paper towel, and literally within 5 seconds of putting this wad of paper towel on the bottom of his foot, it fills with blood, like instantly. And I go, holy shit, get me more paper towel. So I try that maybe 2-3 times. And then I quickly realize, okay, this isn't going to stop the bleeding. We need another plan. So immediately, like, when something like this happens, you kind of like just switch your mode over to what you've been trained to do. And as far as when you're working as a paramedic and there's an uncontrolled bleed that's going to cause trouble to someone's life, there's a bunch of different steps that you got to go through. So the first one is putting pressure on the wound. Put pressure on it and try to get the bleeding to stop with pressure. Most of the time, like 90% of the time, pressure works. Pressure will just do it for you. So I put more pressure on. I go, Dan, I'm going to be honest with you, this is going to hurt like a bitch, but I got to try to get this to work. So I push pretty much as hard as I could on the bottom of his foot. It doesn't work at all. Now, step number 2 as to stopping bleeding is a tourniquet. You've definitely seen this in movies before. You basically take a piece of rope or something, tie off the extremity, and stop blood from going to it. Now, the problem with tourniquets is you're not supposed to take them off. And the problem with that is it doesn't just stop the blood flowing to that area of the foot, it stops the blood from flowing to the entire extremity, which means if it's a long time before the ambulance gets there, remember, we're in the mountains, he might lose his leg. So I don't want to give him a tourniquet. So I don't want to put a tourniquet on. There's also another step called a hemostatic dressing. I don't have that. We just went over. I don't even have a first aid kit. I'm not going to have a hemostatic dressing. Now, luckily, there was one time that I was talking to my preceptor. This is basically the guy who taught me how to be a paramedic. We were just talking about calls he had before, and one of the calls he had was a guy who was carrying a giant pane of glass, dropped it, and cut his arm. Now, my preceptor didn't want to put a tourniquet on this guy because he didn't want him to lose his arm. He worked with his hands. He didn't want him to lose his hands. So what my preceptor did was straddle him and put pressure on the veins of his arms. Basically, if you don't know anything about medicine, they're pressure points. I'm sure you've heard of pressure points before. You put pressure on them and it stops blood from going to that area of the body. So I go, all right, I've heard about this before. So what do? I go, Dan, look at me, buddy. You're going to enjoy this. I straddled him, put my ass right in his face because he's laying on the ground. Put my ass right in his face. Go, Dan, enjoy the view. Lift his leg up between my legs and start putting pressure on his veins. And I would say relatively quickly, within like 10 seconds, I could see that the bleeding was slowing down. So then I grab my friend and I go, who's also at the bachelor party, I go, put pressure on the bottom of Dan's foot with some paper towels. So he does that. And I'm like, really give it some pressure. Don't be afraid to hurt him a little bit. So he puts pressure on the bottom of his foot. We get the bleeding to like pretty much fully stop. And by the time the paramedics got there, there was very, very little bleeding. So job well done. Paramedics get there. We tell them everything that happened. I go, listen, I'm a paramedic. My buddy here, he stepped out of the hot tub, stepped on some broken glass. We couldn't get the bleeding to stop. I put pressure on some pressure points, got the bleeding to stop, and then they wrapped it up, threw him on the stretcher, got him ready to go. And as they were leaving, they're pushing Dan away on the stretcher. Dan turns around to the paramedic and goes, wait. Can I bring a beer to go? Can I bring a beer in the back? And they go, you're going on an ambulance. You're not bringing a beer to go. So Dan leaves. And to this day, he can still walk. He still has his foot. He got 3 stitches on the bottom there. He was limping for like a month, but Dan's alive and Dan has a foot. Now, after Dan leaves, we're talking, we're standing outside like, holy shit, what just happened? I am literally covered in blood from my fingertips to about my elbow, and basically the lower half of my body was covered in blood. So I go, guys, I gotta go shower. Like, I gotta get Dan's blood off of me. So I go hop in the shower, or at least get ready to hop in the shower, go to get undressed. When I take my pants off and have a look down at them, the only area of my pants that got any blood on it, well, remember how I told you I lifted Dan's leg up between my legs? The only area of blood on my pants was right in the crotch. So, in my boxers, I pick up my pants, walk out to the guys and go, guys, I finally got it. Does anybody have a tampon? And that's how you break the tension, ladies and gentlemen. So, the moral of the story, number 1, don't drink alcohol. Number 2, apparently you sober up really quick when your friend cuts his foot open. And number 3, well, I don't have any other lessons. That is the story of the drunk paramedic. It was definitely one of the more shocking things that has ever happened to me while I was drinking, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all my videos, and let me know down in the comments some other stories you'd like to hear from me. But guys, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're